I mean, if I think about some of the challenges that we see in the generations just joining the workforce, and interestingly, we did some research on this recently around the hybrid generation, and the things that you and I would have been expecting out of our career, both the upside, but also some of the challenge and sacrifice that we just took on board because that's what you did to travel up in the organisation, is actually no longer something largely that younger generations joining the workforce are prepared to sacrifice. So focus on mental health and well-being really front and centre in a way that we haven't seen to the same extent in previous generations. And I think that has a big impact on what it means to be a people leader.
Yeah.
There is so much more nuancing that needs to be thought about, particularly if you're operating with a global team, particularly if you're operating with expertise and generalist skill, and that multi-generational aspect. So you're right, it's exactly the same issue.
You mentioned there the global and local side of it, and that's a huge part for us, right?
Yeah.
Because being, the large provider of services globally, you have to have that global consistency, that scale that is value to our clients.
Yeah.
But a fundamental thing is to be local and to have local teams, and we structure our business around markets and geographies, and to try and empower our leaders in those areas. We find that if you have a strong leader who hires well and is active in their market and looks after their people well, you're going to see the retention, and you're going to see low attrition with it. So that balance of how do you have something globally consistent but locally delivered for cultural nuances and for local language it's a constant. You mentioned culture earlier. It's a constant cultural battle, I think, for both organisations and many others, around us. Around how do you really drive that in a meaningful way?
Yeah.
The hard part, I guess, is that it never ends.
Well, exactly. And also on top of that culture, you've got the sort of brand culture and the purpose of your organisation that. You want to be the glue that is about, regardless of whether you're doing work in Taiwan or you're doing work in Hong Kong or Sydney or Luxembourg, it is about the CBRE approach, the BSI approach, but also not losing the innate personality that is relative to those country operations, because they still have to face off to domestic clients and domestic issues.
Yeah, 100%. The cultural adaptations and local adaptations are really, we find really important. I'm sure from a BSI perspective, it's exactly the same. And interestingly, given the type of environments that we support, those critical, mission critical environments, and depending on what report you read, it'll be somewhere most incidents or near misses 60 or 70% will be linked to, in some way, to human error. Yeah. And so that constant investment in human factors training of, are you tired? Being aware of your environment. Have you worked longer than you should? Are you dehydrated? Do you need a drink? And having that culturally in regional and local areas to try and create that consistency, but that empowerment to stop and to say something, we need to pause something because we're going to put our clients or our operation or our people at risk here. Even something as sort of core as that can be challenging across a global organisation to establish in every single space. Yeah,
I agree, and it links through to the fundamental issues around what are the accepted norms in particular country cultures, what is the legislation that exists in those country cultures, and quite often there's almost that what's the necessary education that you provide company by company to ensure that the assumptions that you make are the norms that are going to be applied to all your workers in a specific jurisdiction. And I think that takes me back to a lot of this isn't rocket science, but because it's in some ways sort of best practice that's been established over a number of years, and it should be obvious, often it's just not, and we forget about it. We forget to voice the things that are quite important in having high performance organisations. Yes, it is about well-being, and it is about making sure that you can bring your best self to work, and that we are reflecting the diversity of the communities in which we operate and the clients that we serve. But that then brings that complexity. If everyone was like me or you, in a way it makes life much easier to navigate, because you understand the shortcuts and you understand what is likely to happen next. But you don't necessarily get the best decisions.
Yeah, or any diverse opinion,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so I think that's the other change, and it's probably the other sort of key expectation that we see in multi-generational talent and diverse talent. It's, if I think particularly around some of the AI expertise that everyone's trying to go after, there is something around creating the right environment for productive work from quite a diverse group of folk.
Having those diverse pools that you mentioned to pull from, from our perspective, we would view gender and ability or disabilities within that, regardless, as you've indicated as well, across all of those pools. Yeah. And that diversity is key to driving it forward and keeping that culture of process balanced with innovation, and challenging the norm to not only to develop new ideas and new ways of doing things, but having that ability to check and challenge in order to say no or to say stop when you need to, from a safety or from an operational perspective.
Yeah, and you're right. Actually, it took me back actually to part of the sort of strategic requirement for us in really thinking carefully about culture, and going from a way of operating as an organisation that could be described as more analogue than digital, but with a need to become much more of a digital business, and therefore that requirement of, well, what is the culture that you need that takes you from an environment where, yes, it is still expert-led, still has a heavy process aspect, but it also has a disruptive element, but disruptive within a narrow framework that doesn't bridge across into safety critical areas. And that's quite an interesting and dynamic challenge to think about from a culture perspective, because as your strategy grows, you're constantly looking at your culture to say, well, is it going to get us to where we need to get to? And if not, what levers do we have to start doing? And how does that link through to the discipline in process? At what point is discipline in process restrictive on innovation as opposed to enabling on innovation? So the shared language of culture actually, I think, has been the biggest benefit for us. It has enabled quite disparate populations often to have a language that makes it acceptable to question and to challenge, but to do that in a way that still feels that you're in the same team and you're being supportive of each other. And so really thinking about where the accountability sits, where you're innovating within a safe environment so that it doesn't impact trust and reputation and brand and client experience, but rather it enhances that. And I think the truth of this is that we are trying to ideate our way through that in quite an agile way. And some of it works, and where it doesn't, we try and create the environment where you can call that out quickly and we can adapt. we all as humans go back into the thing that causes least energy, and often that's the bad habits that we've got into over many years. So we're trying to think of other ways to create new muscle memories.
I think you've just described every multinational corporate, right? The challenge between, do you organise by country, do you organise by service line or by client? And life in the matrix of matrix reporting can be tricky. We've always tried to balance the need for country with the need for a common customer experience, so that account management side of things. And we have people whose specific job it is to look after the client's interests and service from regional teams. And sometimes some solutions will mean a slightly different structure to that. And as a service organisation, we have to be prepared to do that. Obviously, repeatability leads to scale and such there. But you end up with, I've always found personally, whether it's in any organisation I've worked in, that organisational structures and organisational methodologies and races are fantastic, absolutely important part, but it's behaviours that fix an organisational structure or fill in the gaps and are the mortar between the bricks of it.
Yeah. The purpose that binds us together around a fair society for a sustainable world means that the types of individuals who tend to stay with us and are attracted to work with us, that almost is the higher purpose around the choice they have about where they could work. And so that individual preference on behaviour that sometimes outplays where you don't have a really strong organisational purpose, I think we benefit from. We can then layer on top of that the things, practical things. So we did a piece of work in the last 18 months around BSI story, which is a way of talking through that journey that we have to go through, because every organisation has frustration points, right? I don't think I've worked in a single organisation in my career where you didn't have the occasional day where you'd think, really? We're doing this.
We're filming a video.
Oh yeah, we're filming a video in an unair-conditioned room. But that just happens. And I think the thing that really binds the behaviour piece together is actually we're here to do something that is really important. And my part and my contribution in that depends upon me thinking about what is the shadow that I'm casting. Because we're all casting a shadow. Is it the one we intend it to be? And so part of the culture work that we've done has just tried to give some very practical ways of self-reflection, as well as for individuals to call that out. Of course, we have the same issues that every organisation has, where sometimes behaviour is not what it should be, and we then have to deal with that. And we have to think about, is that a capability issue? Is it an issue where an individual absolutely knows the right thing to do and they've just decided to do something different? And try and apply a consistent approach across the various legal jurisdictions that we work in, but that's something that can be seen as, well, this is acceptable and that is not acceptable, and that is reinforced consistently. It is about consistency.
Yeah, those organisational behaviours or values, ours are the RISE values: respect, integrity, service and excellence. And having that common purpose or common standard to hold each other to, I think is really, really powerful within that. It's fascinating you mentioned purpose in terms of the fairer society side of it. We're constantly trying to stress that within our organisation, safety, uptime and reliability and engineering excellence, people management and the best talent. And it's those things that we find nowadays that are the differentiators. Yes, pay is important. Yes, benefits are important. Yes, you need to be tracking market, but career development in the right sort of environment and the right sort of culture
trumps it.
Every day of the week. those developments of and developing teams and promotions and opportunities within internally, it's not only a huge attraction that we find in the marketplace, but it's only valuable if you follow through with it.
Yeah.
And so having those career pathways for all roles within the organisation, whether that is a day or a shift technician into a shift lead or a shift engineer, and then into maybe site manager or contract manager type roles with more people leadership and more of that general sort of business side of it, and client engagements is one path for one type of person or one way an individual can continue to grow. Similarly, if they are, and I imagine it's similar with some of your standards teams as well, is if actually their passion is the engineering side of it and the operational side of it and the technical side of it, how do we have a path for them? And so we deploy specialist teams around our regional and market businesses. So we invest in technical and QHSE leaders and operational support leaders around each of our sites where we're performing service. And so there's those subject matter expert type roles that can offer that promotion and development. So trying to cater and have those career pathways for everybody is a really important feature, not only to retain talent and promote people from within, but also to deliver on your promises when you're investing in people from the marketplace. And people have joined you with that, and often it's important, I think, to follow through with those opportunities and those commitments from a longer term retention perspective, which is that ability for people to check and to lead with safety in their discussions. So we'll drive team meetings and our regular cadence meetings will always start with safety. We'll always start with a safety moment. We'll always look to empower people and to celebrate people stopping work or taking safety precautions that prevent a near miss. We look at some leading indicators, like a lot of businesses, in terms of incident rates and so on, but we also focus on lagging indicators, but we also focus a lot on leading indicators as well. So rates of observation, training, compliance, in order to try and day in, day out promote that culture of everybody looking left and right and seeing their colleague or seeing their friend and making that promise to each other in that moment that we're all going to go home safely today. And so that culture from the top down throughout all of CBRE, as well as specifically within DCS, is really, the data center business, is really important to us, and that championing of team spirit and that purpose that you alluded to earlier in what we do and what our teams do every single day. That for us is a really strong and unifying purpose, alongside having the best talent, providing our clients with what they want, and the purpose of the banks, banking, and hospitals healing, but as a unifying talent binding resource, as well as it being a fundamental requirement. Safety for us is a really unifying purpose.